Welcome into the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Hello and welcome to the Coaching Clubhouse. I'm your host, Adrian Last. If you're here in Europe, you've been on summer holidays. I hope you've had a brilliant time and relaxed. And if you've been on holidays anywhere else in the world, then equally, I hope you've had a great time. Now, today I've got a truly fascinating guest joining me, someone who's not only at the top of their game in the world of coaching, but also happens to have one of the best sidekicks in the business. Clive Leach is an executive coach, an internationally recognized speaker, author, and lecturer who's worked across sectors from business to education to healthcare, helping people balance well-being, purpose, and performance. He's known for blending cutting-edge thinking in positive psychology and systems leadership with grounded, real-world coaching. And he sometimes brings along a very special assistant to coaching sessions, his canine companion, Miss May, because honestly, who wouldn't benefit from the presence of a good dog to listen intently and create calm? Clive, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for spending the time and being here.
Okay, well, thank you, Adrian, for inviting me and us. You'll meet Miss May a bit later on, I'm sure.
Excellent. Well, I very much hope so. It'd be good to see the two of you together. Now, Clive, you've had such a rich and varied coaching career. What originally drew you to this work?
Okay, well, it's a good question. I guess I started my career back in the 80s in youth and community work, youth and community education, which was something I was very passionate about, working with sort of quite disenfranchised communities in inner city London. And then quite quickly, I got into management and leadership of community education services. And that started to take a different sort of toll on me, really. And it got to around maybe 2000, and I was experiencing what we will call today burnout. We didn't talk about burnout in those days.
Okay.
But it was beyond the idea of exhaustion. It was just I was tired because I worked really, really hard for like the previous 15 years. Yeah. But I was getting a bit more cynical about, disengaged a little bit from the mission, from the purpose. And also, which I think is one of the most challenging parts of burnout, is that inefficacy that can kick in when you actually start to think, am I really any good at this? Even despite the fact that we all have often a history of achievement, you start to really question whether you're really actually adding any value.
Yeah.
And I started to feel a bit like that. So I made a decision in 2001 to take a year off, had a year break, took a sabbatical. And I ended up traveling in Asia Pac for a year. And on the way back to the UK, I was offered an opportunity to teach or to lecture in organisational communication skills at Thammasat University in Bangkok. And just an opportunity arose. And I thought, well, maybe it's something different to do for a year. I've had a year out anyway. And so I took this opportunity to teach at Thammasat. And I loved it. And I had an epiphany. And my epiphany was that I don't enjoy managing people at all. And I spent like sort of the last sort of 12 or so, 15 years of my career managing people. What I wanted to do was to grow people, to develop people. What got me into youth and community work wasn't about managing anybody. It was about actually helping people to grow. Yeah. So it was quite an interesting experience. And so I thought, well, how do I start to think about a career that will allow me to grow people rather than manage them? The teaching was only ever going to be temporary. And so I studied an online coaching course. And as a result, set up a little coaching practice in Thailand, in Bangkok, that actually allowed me to work with my students, most of whom are working in international context. So they'll be using English as a first language at work. Yeah. And then some private clients. And I loved it. And I thought, wow, maybe this is where I should be heading. And I thought, how do I therefore transition from being like an educator, an education manager, to becoming like an organizational coach? Because I was quite clear that I wanted to try and work in a way that I could impact organizations. And so that led me to transition to Australia in 2007 to study a master's in organizational coaching at the University of Sydney Coaching Psychology Unit. And my journey started from there, really. And that's what sort of got me involved in the idea of coaching.
And when you sort of look back at your coaching journey, was there a particular session or a moment where you think, this is what I'm meant to do?
Absolutely. And it's such a lovely question to be asked, actually, because I think the very first night I was in the quadrangle at Sydney University, which is quite famous. It's the old traditional part of the university under the acacia tree. And Tony Grant, Professor Tony Grant, who sadly passed away in 2020, he was my lecturer. and he started talking about the evidence base for coaching psychology, socio-cognitive coaching, solution-focused coaching, preferred futures, goal setting, resilience, hope. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like what good youth work is. This is like what good education is. This is like what good management is. And it just made me immediately feel that I was in the right place, that it was almost like, wow, there's an evidence base, all this stuff that I sort of believe in, but I never knew there was any science behind it, didn't know any of it at all. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting.
Yeah.
And it completely reinvigorated my my passion for education. So it was a pretty cool thing. And also that Tony introduced me to coaching psychology, and then Dr. Susie Green introduced me to positive psychology in the second semester. And both of them changed my life. I mean, incredible. I mean, when I listened to Susie talking about strengths and optimism and Seligman's work on PERMA, and the applicability of all of this, again, with young people in organizations, it was like, oh my gosh, and I sort of made it my mission then, when I was graduating, to share what I'd learned with the world. And it sounds pretty cheesy, but I really wanted to get out there and try and share it in as many places as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I set out to do, and what I've really been doing for the last 15 years, I guess.
Wow. So you mentioned there about positive psychology. For people that are listening that don't necessarily know what positive psychology is, can you explain it to us? And also, you're known for integrating positive psychology into coaching, from what I've read on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
How does that change the conversation in a coaching session?
Okay, well, so positive psychology is called the science of well-being, and I like to call it, other people call it also the science of what makes life worth living. So psychology historically is focused on pathology and what's wrong with people. Positive psychology says, well, what's right with people? How is it that despite adversity, despite challenge, despite trauma even, some people are able to continue to thrive and go out in the world and make the best of the world, whereas others actually struggle. So what are those people who continue to thrive doing, and what can we learn from that? And that's what sort of positive psychology as a science studies.
Okay.
In a coaching context, where it makes a difference, I believe, in the coaching conversation, is the link between well-being and performance. So Tony Grant, as an example, wrote a number of many peer-reviewed papers, but a couple of his papers focused on, one was on the return on investment for coaching, and his argument was that people are very focused on coaching outcomes and performance rather than the impact on well-being. And actually what happens is a lot of people are coached at the expense of their well-being rather than to enhance their well-being, and that is not sustainable in the long term. You can't keep squeezing sort of blood out of a stone.
Yeah.
So that was one angle, and I guess the other element with well-being, the other paper that Tony Grant talked about was what we call third generation coaching, which was again seeing a shift from coaching being something which is a formal executive coach talking to an executive client about performance, to creating conversations in organizations where there is a much greater focus on well-being and performance. And that actually shifts the culture of an organization. So people are showing that they actually care about each other's well-being too. So I think that's the fundamental difference. So when I'm working with a client, it depends on the context of the program. Some programs are explicitly about well-being and performance, or about well-being. Others, more people come in expecting it to be more performance focused.
Yeah.
What I will always bring in is an element of assessment in terms of how are you, where are you at, how are you feeling, what's working, what's not working, and I make that point because a lot of people I'm working with in the executive community and leadership space are doing really well. There's no question they're not successful, but they're out to well-being for whatever reason it might be. It could be they're not working to their strengths. It could be their relationships are pretty toxic. It could be they've lost their sense of meaning and purpose, like why am I here? All sorts of different reasons are actually undermining their capacity to perform. And they go into that place of potential distress, which can then lead to burnout. And that burnout can then lead to more clinical issues, which obviously are much more serious to treat. And I don't deal in the clinical space at all. But certainly what I'm able to do is assess where people are at, to support people to sort of try and prevent themselves falling into that space.
Yeah. Have you seen an increase in organizations, and I suppose people as well, executives in particular organizations? Have you seen an increase in a focus on well-being? Because it feels to me where I'm sat in my day job at ITV that there is far more focus on people's well-being, and actually how this comes into coaching and line management is really important. But what's that increase from your perspective?
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely been an increase in awareness of it and an increase in people talking about it. But whether that translates into actually doing anything practical about it or not, I think is another issue.
Okay.
So lots and lots of organisations they're doing great work on wellbeing programs, and they do all sorts of support. Is it EAP support, mindfulness programs, sort of wellbeing days, wellbeing weeks, etc., which is all good. But one of the key things around coaching psychology and coaching and positive psychology is what we argue is that they're like complementary partners. So, and a really good example, I had a really good example today, actually. Of where you can introduce a well-being intervention with a client, a mindfulness as an example. There's lots of evidence about the benefits of mindfulness-based activity. But how would you ensure they actually do anything with it? You can go on a course, you can read a book, you can watch videos on YouTube. There's all sorts of stuff out there on mindfulness, right? And we would argue that what the coaching conversations do is help people to find well-being interventions that are actually aligned to their needs and where they sit, because everyone's different. We always say no one size fits all. And once you've actually had an opportunity to assess, well, what is it about your well-being that might need a bit of input? And what might you try? The coaching helps you then to go away and try that and come back and be accountable of did it work? Did it not work? No, it didn't. Well, let's try something else. Or did it work? Okay, how do we help you to sustain that? And so the coaching conversations allow people to embed change and embed the practice of doing something different, which is where you're more likely to get an outcome. So I think a lot of people talk about, oh, we did a resilience program at work last year, but what did you do as a result of that program? Okay, and I think where you see the combination of it, and it doesn't need to be well-being programs. More and more now we're seeing the most effective leadership programs are programs where leaders are introduced to all sorts of leadership principles, and there will be hopefully elements of well-being included in that. But those leadership programs are combined with coaching. And the whole point is that what does this all mean for you? How are you going to apply this in your world, in your personal life, in your professional life? And how then do you embed that practice and find ways to share it with other people? And I think the coaching element is the bit that's often missing.
And one article I read that you wrote was about psychological capital. How does that fit into what you were talking about here? How have you seen this working with people that you've coached?
Yeah, I love PsyCap as a construct. So psychological capital is we talk about the hero principles. So the four key things is hope, efficacy, resilience, and optimism. And hope is an amazing construct on its own, because the idea of hope is that people who are high hopers are able to set meaningful goals. They have a sense of vision where they want to be. They're not waiting for the world to come to them. They're saying, well, I can see where I want to go. They have a sense of agency, a sense of belief and confidence that they can reach those goals. And they're very good at pathway thinking. So they're very good at finding different routes, particularly when we face obstacles and barriers. And so hope as a construct as part of self-efficacy, I think, is really important. So it's part of psychological capital. And the efficacy element, I think, is often overlooked because we take for granted, we're confident that actually efficacy is about the ability to work to our strengths and understanding what our strengths are, and mastering that and being able to evidence the progress in terms of our strengths use. It's about managing our emotions effectively, emotional arousal, because obviously our emotions become big derailers for us. It's about vicarious experience, about looking at where other people are doing well and actually being inspired by that. And I see a lot of people who actually are threatened by other people. I mean, it's like, if I'm feeling vulnerable and stressed myself as a leader or as a manager, it's quite possible that I see the people around me as a threat. My peers as a threat, my direct reports, the positive energizers in my team. Hey, I've got ideas, Clive. It's like, oh, that's a bit, and those people get shut down. Whereas if we can build our self-efficacy, our psychological capital, we're more likely to be inspired by other people. And then the other element of efficacy is about that ability to ask for support and help, which again, arguably, is where coaching is a great support for the efficacy. The resilience bit, I think people are familiar with the idea of resilience, but I like to make the distinction between what we would call more the rugged resilience, which are those internal assets that we can draw upon, that we don't sometimes recognize we've got. Our optimism, our sense of humor, as examples, and also those external resources we can draw upon to navigate through challenges. And then the optimism element, I think is really important, because a lot of people will come into coaching conversations where they'll say, "Oh my God, how is everything going? It's terrible. Oh, it's like awful. It's really, really bad. Oh, what's so bad? Oh, I've got like a revolting team member, or I've got like a challenge with my boss, or whatever it might be."
Yeah.
Okay, so, but how bad is bad on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, it's like an 8 or a 9. It's like, well, okay, really? Okay, let's just take a step back from this a moment, and then start to look at what's really going on here. And there's a really interesting construct you may be aware of around learned optimism, where you can, using cognitive behavioral theory, to help people to say, well, actually, what's going on in my mind? What am I telling myself here?
Yeah.
How is that impacting on how I feel? Stressed, worried? How does that impact my behavior? Defensive, run away, withdraw, fawn, I'll just do more, all these defensive behaviors kick in. And giving people the chance to take a step back and get a sense of perspective is so important. And again, and I think that, well, I know that coaching conversations, again, instill hope, build efficacy, support resilience, and build optimism. And so that's, again, so it's a really nice construct to bring into conversations. And if people are struggling, and obviously partly my role or your role as a coach is to listen to those conversations and think, okay, well, what's going on there? I mean, what is, and then maybe bring in what might be appropriate to help people to take a step back and think about some of this.
Let's talk about Miss May for a moment. Your work on pause for wellbeing and the impact.
Do you want to meet Miss May?
Is she there?
She's here. Come here. She's been waiting for her entrance.
Very patient.
There she is.
Oh.
So this is Miss May, who's a up. Here we go. Who's a golden doodle. She's like one thing, but she's actually a golden doodle. Yeah. So Miss May is she's a therapy dog, a Pets therapy visiting pet dog. So one of the things that I've done over the last 15 years, I graduated from Sydney Uni in 2008. And my joke is I never left. And the reason I say that is because every single year, virtually apart from COVID, since I graduated, I've attended like the world's leading conferences on coaching psychology and positive psychology. So I've invested in my continual learning over the years. And in 2019, I went to the World Congress on Positive Psychology in Melbourne, and I met a lady called Ros Rhymes, who had 2 therapy dogs, Wellbeing dogs, with Rafa and Flash. And at that point, I was just thinking about getting a puppy. I moved back from the UK to London. So I moved back from Australia to London, and then I just moved from London down to the South Coast, where I'm based now. And I had the South Downs. I had a house with a garden. I had an opportunity to have a dog. And so I met Ros and her 2 canine companions, and thought, wow, I'm going to get a dog, but I'd never thought about linking a dog to my work on well-being. It never occurred to me. And so long story short, I went home, started to look at getting a litter of puppies, and the mother of the litter I chose was a therapy dog. So I thought, well, that's got to be a sign, stars have aligned on that one. And so we got May in 2019, and she's absolutely gorgeous. Her temperament, very, very calm. I mean, she's like any puppy, a bit naughty, but she was, but always had such a lovely, lovely temperament. And so in 2021, I got May assessed as a therapy dog through Pets Therapy. And we started doing some work in children's homes and care homes for the elderly initially. And then since 2022, May's been an accredited volunteer with the National Health Service at our local hospital. So and she goes on to the acute stroke ward, which is a fairly intense environment, as you can imagine, both for the patients and for the people who work there. And that's her regular spot, is to go into the hospital to the acute stroke ward. And so we do that on we haven't been in the last month, but we normally go a couple of times a month, and to a care home as well.
Have you noticed that from a coaching perspective, when Miss May is part of that, have you noticed that clients open up more or differently when she's around?
Yeah, well, I guess from the work we do from a dog therapy perspective, I mean, it's all about her. It's not really about me. I mean, when they assess us when the dog is assessed, they assess how you are together, obviously. So it's my relationship with May is really important. When I go into a hospital or we go into a care home, I'm there to add value. I'm not there to create any agendas, and I'm very present, and I ask lots of questions, and I use many coaching skills, if you like, in that context. And May just brings this sense of joy and amusement. She generates, I call it a perma-pup, Permah, because she generates positive emotions, which is the P of perma. She gets people engaged and focused, and they get very much in the moment. You can see how relationships get enhanced when she comes into an environment. People get the oxytocin hit with the cuddles and the petting, and they talk to each other and they share stories. And in the hospital, the staff just have these moments where they come together, and the doctors and nurses all come together and greet her. She gives a sense of meaning and purpose, I think, to people who work in those environments. And generally sort of contributes to people's physical and mental well-being, which is a lovely thing to do. From a coaching perspective, there's a couple of examples. You'll see behind me is a picture of May. Maybe you can just see it on the behind me. And I can't tell you, and it's just there. But how many clients? I had my first meeting online. Most of my coaching would be done online. And the first meeting with a client, I was like, "Oh, is that you got a dog?" And just by having the photograph of May, often it helps to build rapport and helps to bond with a client if they are doggy people. They're not all doggy people, but here's my dog, and now their dog comes up, and then we end up having a dog conversation before we even start talking about anything to do with coaching. So there's an element of rapport building there that happens. And then from an actual outdoor coaching perspective, one of the areas of work that I'm getting more interested in is the idea of outdoor coaching. And I have worked with May with clients on the South Downs when we go out walking and talking together. And again, May just brings this different type of presence. People relax much more quickly, I find, and they also feel they're seen. One of the things they said is like she's very attentive, and they like the fact that they're being given this attention by her. And I worried when I first started doing the work that I'll just give an example is that she has a ball and she's a retriever, and she's really good at bringing the ball back. But she's terrible at giving it to you. She doesn't drop it. I mean, she's got she never drops the ball. And yet with a client, I was with a client and we're walking up the hill, and May was like taking the ball, dropping the ball for the client, and the client was throwing the ball, and then we come up and drop the ball. And I was thinking, oh God, this is a bit distracting, because it's like, and I said, oh, this is really unusual. So she doesn't normally ever give the ball back. And the client said, but she is for me, and she's seen me, and she's noticed. And the client was just really enthralled by the fact that May was having this interaction with her. That we were able then just to generate this sort of space where the client then opened up ironically, about not being seen at work, about being hidden at work, not having the visibility that they wanted. And it was just interesting how I think sort of May's interaction actually gave the clients the space or permission, if you like, to actually raise that as a theme, as a topic.
Interesting. And you mentioned outdoor coaching and getting a bit more into that, and presumably your beautiful location in the UK helps that. What are you finding that's so kind of interesting about the world of outdoor coaching?
Well, I think the key thing for me is around nature connectedness and about the benefits. So there's so much research. I mean, again, this is why it's so interesting. It's just in the last 2 years, by going to the European Congress on Positive Psychology in Innsbruck, and then going to Brisbane this year. The amount of research that's been presented on the benefits of nature connectedness, of being out in nature, for our health, for our physical, or for our mental health, our physical health. And so the idea of actually giving people space to be in nature, to appreciate it, to savor it, to care for it, to look at the analogies and the metaphors that it brings is really, really powerful. And obviously May being an added value to that is something which I'm trying to explore, really.
Now, Clive, I've just got a couple more questions for you. I mean, I've got many questions, but we will run out of time inevitably. You've worked with senior leaders, I guess, in complex organizations. What do you think is the biggest misconception about executive coaching? I guess I put that in quote marks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you might be surprised to hear me say it, but I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's all about performance, and it's about OKRs, KPIs. It's about getting the bottom line sorted, and that's where the focus is, rather than actually having an opportunity to think about the well-being side. And I still think for many, I work with clients. Literally, I'm working with clients now who, as I've raised the well-being theme, have gone like, why are you talking about that? Where's that coming from? I mean, we don't well-being here. You've got to be like, seriously, it's almost like it's and actually like I couldn't possibly talk about my well-being in that context, because I've got to be seen to be absolutely on.
Yeah.
So, and one of the areas of work that I think is so important is working with senior leaders. And when I say senior leaders, I mean CEOs or school principals or boards, and actually helping them to feel safe enough to talk about their well-being. And again, I've got examples of doing that right now with people at the top of the organization who are coming very much from outcomes, achievements, it's focus, who are just now beginning to think about, oh yeah, I can see actually this is good for me to have an opportunity to think about this stuff.
Yeah.
And actually, if it's good for me, then this could be really important for my people as well. So I think that's still a big challenge.
And if someone's listening to this, as many people do, haven't done coaching before, and thinking about working with a coach for the first time, what do you think they should look for?
I think, well, they should look for someone who has a credible coaching qualification, who has some understanding of why, not just how to coach, but why coaching works, and the evidence base, and that should be relatively up to date. I think that is really important. Ideally credentialed, but credentialing doesn't guarantee that people actually know how coaching works, but it should mean that their practice has met credential requirements. I think supervision is really important, and we have complex clients and complex cases. We're not there to tell people what to do, obviously, but we have a responsibility, we have a duty of care, and we have a duty of care to ourselves as well. So I would certainly want to ensure that if I had a coach, that coach was receiving supervision, and they were able to evidence that in some way. And then I guess the whole idea of rapport is important, and chemistry. We talk about the coaching chemistry, but, and I'll have a caveat with the coaching chemistry, is that it isn't just about finding someone you like or finding someone who's like you, because coaching is about being stretched, it's about being challenged. And the rapport is, the trust is really important, but actually finding a coach who may be have a slightly different way of thinking from you, maybe bringing in ideas that you haven't really thought of before, or you haven't really come across before, rather than going with someone who just talks the same language as you, I think is quite important. So be open to be challenged, be open to hear things you've not heard before, and I could give testimony to the benefits of that. When people said, well, when I first met you, I wasn't sure, because of your background and the whole positive psychology part, wasn't really sure about all of that. But we met, and I felt I could trust you. I felt you could create the space, and I'm really, really pleased now. I had a woman recently say to me, who was quite reticent at first about some of these conversations, that she felt rejuvenated personally and professionally at the end of the coaching. Gone on to do like some amazing things. Seriously amazing things. Not just because of what I did with her, but obviously she found the coaching really helpful.
It's so powerful. There's so many stories like that from people that have done coaching, and and that's what, and it happened to me. That's that was my first experience with coaching. It's incredible. Clive, we've run out of time, sadly. How can people get in contact with you? Where can they find you?
Okay, so the best place for people to contact me is on LinkedIn, because I use that. LinkedIn is really my go-to for what I publish, for my articles, what I'm up to, what I'm doing, etc. So LinkedIn is great. Miss May does also have a newspaper column in Inside Publications, Pause for Wellbeing. So it's a monthly column on wellbeing. So Inside Publications, you can have a Google of them, and it's available online as well. So you can get And also I put the articles on LinkedIn as well. So you can catch them there. And Miss May also has her own Instagram page, which is at May_Red Golden Girl. So if anybody wants to find out more about Miss May and her work, you can find her on Instagram.
Fantastic. Clive, thank you so much for spending time talking to me today in the Clubhouse. I wish you and Miss May all the very best. I'm delighted that she could join us.
All right, well, thank you.
As well.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you, and have a good rest of your day. Take care then.
Thanks, Clive. Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Thanks again to Clive, and thanks to you for listening to this episode of the Coaching Clubhouse. Remember to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast to be notified about future episodes and other exciting news and information. I'll be back next time with another fascinating guest talking about the world of coaching. But for the moment, thanks again for listening, and see you very soon.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.